Hello, this is Hunter McDermott with another Anyone Can Play Guitar video. This is another listener-viewer question. The question is, do I need to learn 1 million scales? And the obvious answer, I think, is no. But to go into more detail, I thought I would break this down into two parts in this same video. One, I'm just going to look at what you should start with, and how what you start with will take you extremely far just by itself, and then perhaps where you might go next as your musical interests may dictate, what kinds of things that you're into. So to start with, let's say you don't know any scales, and you feel like you need to know them, or you've been told you need to know them, or you're just discovering that. So where should you start? I think a pretty natural answer would be to learn your major scales. Boom. All right. It's pretty simple. And in fact, I did a video on major scales specifically, and with the guitar, you've got a lot of neck to cover here, so it's common to break them down into different fingering patterns. I personally use the caged system, which is what I detail in those videos. There are other methods like 3 notes per string and some other ones. Everybody's kind of got their own different way of doing it. And I'm not convinced that one is necessarily better than the other. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. But I won't get too much into the nitty-gritty of how to actually play these because I kind of already did. So go check out the major scale videos, how to play the major scales on a guitar, for info about how to actually do it. But from a more theoretical standpoint, what's so great about this, about learning your major scales, is they include so many other scales, right? We just finished putting out a series on the modes. I did a 3-part series on the modes. So if you are interested, check that out to get a broader overview of what those are. But so why the major scale is so powerful is because if you take a major scale, say I play the G major scale. Now, if I start that same scale from A and go, instead of from G to G, I go from A to A, I'm now playing the A Dorian mode, right? Which is technically a totally different scale, right? And the modes videos go into why exactly that is and the exact makeup of the Dorian scale, but it's already there. It's inside of those major scales already. So like using the examples that I gave in the how to actually play them, your first pattern starts on the root of the scale, so that's your major scale, or your Ionian mode, aka. If you start the second pattern, it starts on the second note of the scale. And that's already, it's both G major and A Dorian. And then if you go up again, you have B Phrygian, C Lydian, D Mixolydian, E Aeolian, and F sharp Locrian. So all 7 of those scales are built into kind of what we think of as one big scale, which is the major scale. So the key then, once you learn those, is to understand how you can apply the different modes over chord changes, and that's what we just talked about in the modes videos. But the major scale is a perfect place to start because it's like 7 for the price of 1, right? You get all of this stuff. And also, as I mentioned in that video, the 6th scale degree of the major scale, if you start your major scale on the 6th note, you get something called the natural minor scale. So natural minor is otherwise known as the Aeolian mode, but like Ionian is major, Aeolian is minor, and that's kind of what we think of as like the big 2. Like for most popular music you've heard is probably written in a major key or a minor key, right? Those are the big 2 sounds that we hear. And again, those are built into the same broader umbrella of scales, which is just your major scales, right? If you play it off of the first note, you have major. If you play it off of the 6th note, you have natural minor. I did a video on natural minor, so you can check that out as well. But so there you go. That's covering the big two, and then you also have these extra 5 modes, which give you plenty more power. So I would just start there, honestly. Just do that, right? If you're curious about how to get started and you want to feel like you're covering the most ground, getting the most bang for your buck, learn your major scales, understand what major and natural minor are. They're examples of modes, so eventually learn your modes, and you'll realize that you kind of already have a lot of the stuff under your fingers. It's just a matter of applying it in different scenarios. So like when we're playing a Dorian mode, we're effectively playing the same fingerings on the guitar as we would play for a major scale. But the difference is the context. We're playing over a chord progression that's different than it might be if we were playing major, right? Again, the modes videos go into the details there. But you're going to get tons, like I would almost say limitless mileage out of just that one scale because of all the ones that it includes. So that's part one. Learn your major scales, and you can get so much out of that. But let's say, for sake of more info in this video, that you are getting into jazz, maybe, or I don't know too much about other genres, but let's say you're getting into jazz or blues or maybe some metal music or prog or anything that's kind of gonna have slightly more sophisticated sounds. Not that pop music can't, but that it just doesn't as often. So you're getting into slightly more intellectual music and you're wanting to find new and interesting sounds, playing over more complex harmony, more extended chords, breaking away from adhering to specific keys, and you're just kind of playing in little bite-sized chunks of keys as you're switching around among various different keys. So to kind of summarize this list, and it's not exhaustive, there are tons of scales. There are probably more scales I don't know or have never even heard of than there are that I do know. But I find that I don't really need to know that much more than I already do as far as the theoretical standpoint. I've got plenty of practicing to do, of course. But so let's just put it in the context of jazz, because jazz has very complex harmony often. It can be somewhat intimidating how complex it can be, how many different scales and chords and things that go into just playing, just kind of jamming along with your friends even, can be quite complicated if you let it. But as a good starting point, Gary Burton, the fantastic vibraphone player and jazz teacher, likes to summarize it into 10 scales. So that's how he sees, like, if you know these 10 scales, you can pretty much improvise or write or whatever. You can play anything just about with these 10 scales. Well, so what are the 10 scales? There's Lydian, Ionian, Mixolydian, Dorian, Aeolian, Phrygian, Locrian. That's 7 of the 10 already. And check it out, those are the 7 modes, which are already kind of wrapped up in the major scale. So that's 10 of them already, or 7 of them already. So the other 3 he lists are Lydian flat 7, which is, as the name implies, it's the Lydian mode, which has the sharp 4 with a flat 7. Lydian flat 7. And then the other one is the altered scale. Now the Lydian flat 7 scale and the altered scale are both, they both come from another scale called the melodic minor scale. So I'm going to add this. So we've got major on the list. So if you learn melodic minor, then you will, within that, just the same way that all these modes, Lydian, Mixolydian, Phrygian, Locrian, all that stuff, come from the major scale, if we treat the melodic minor scale the same way and we build like a different scale off of each of the scale degrees, then we come up with all kinds of new modes. These are modes of the melodic minor scale instead of modes of the major scale. And 2 of them that you end up with are Lydian flat 7 and the altered scale. So the melodic minor scale, you can think of it as basically the major scale with a flat 3. So, for example, you'd have, let's see, we could do C melodic minor would be C, D, and then we have a flat 3, so E flat, F, G, A, and B. That would be C melodic minor, something like this. Right? And I won't go into the details for all the different applications of the melodic minor scale. That's a video in itself, and I'll make a note to do that one in the future. But if you learn that one, that again is providing you with a multitude of different sounds. So let's do a cleaner list here. So we have major, learn that one, and we have melodic minor. Okay, and then the last one that he lists is the symmetrical diminished. And symmetrical diminished is actually referring to a couple different scales. Symmetrical diminished. And what it is you're playing a pattern of half steps and whole steps, or whole steps and half steps. So you'd have like half whole would be start on any note, go a half step, then go a whole step, then a half, then a whole, half, whole, half whole, half whole. Just repeating that pattern. And then the inverse of that is whole, half, whole, half. So whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, and so on. Again, that's another video all by itself. But this is something that would work really nice over a chord that we looked at, that we saw in our third modes video, which was an A7 flat 5, or an altered dominant chord. Symmetrical diminished works really well over something like that. I'll save more details on that for another video. And then that's the last one that he mentions, and that kind of wraps up most of it. But there are a couple more that I would say I get mileage out of that would make your playing a little bit more complete. So let's do also the harmonic minor scale. So there are lots of minor scales, as you're discovering. Right. And the harmonic minor scale is basically the natural minor scale with a sharp 7. So that would sound something like this. And we'll do a video on that one too in the future, because that one's pretty useful. I find it's really somewhat closely related to the natural minor scale. Like its existence came from trying to play chord progressions in a minor scale, in a minor key, and losing the strong sense of tension and resolution that the major scale provides. So the harmonic minor scale kind of adds that tension back in. So that's something that you hear in like lots of bossa nova tunes. I find really lean on that kind of sound. You're doing stuff like E7, which is a dominant chord, but instead of going to A, which you might normally hear in a major scale, you'd hear to a minor. And that comes directly from the harmonic minor scale. And we'll talk about that more later. But that would be another one. And then the final one that I find comes up, not as often, but more often than something even more obscure, would be the whole tone scale. Whoa, my writing. All right, whole tone. And as the name suggests, it is all whole steps. So it'd be something like... You're just playing whole steps the whole time, no half step jumps at all. And that works really well over stuff like dominant chords with like a sharp 5. Something like that. So again, that's another So I don't want to make this a useless video, but we're not going to go into the details of what all these things are. We have covered major, and that includes all the major modes, the modes of the major scale. I think we'll probably cover harmonic minor next, and then maybe melodic minor, and then we'll cover these other ones in their own videos. But really, I'm doing this video because I want you to not feel like you need to know this stuff right now. Even over jazz music, which has very complex harmony, often you still don't really need it. What you need is the major scale and the modes of the major scale. That's what you need as like a baseline. I can play over this music and hit plenty of notes that sound great. And people did that for a long time. And then as the music got more sophisticated, we were looking for, it became more predictable, I guess. Like, okay, we've been playing these songs written in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s for years and years now, and we kind of know how to play over them. Like, people have learned how to do this. They know what Charlie Parker did. They know what Miles did and all this kind of stuff. So they are looking for more interesting ways to play over stuff. I mean, some of this stuff was happening back then too, and I'm sure before that. But as the music evolves, as any musical genre, idiom evolves, it evolves, right? It grows and changes, and people come up with new ideas and new ways to play over it. So we'll get into that stuff, but I want to kind of just give you more of a roadmap. Like, okay, major really is for as far as you can see, right? That never stops being relevant. You learn that stuff now, it will serve you well forever. And then these other 4 scales, and then there are even ones beyond that, and plenty more that I've never even heard of, I'm sure, will encompass so much more and give you just more targeted, kind of the same way that the modes are used, not in that you sit down and you just play a whole song in one mode. You can, but sometimes, more often, you just apply a mode here or there over one chord change or one piece of a tune or something like that to kind of give it some interesting color and dimension. And that's what this kind of stuff can do for us. So, step 1, learn your major scales. Step 2, don't worry about step 2. Step 3, go back to step 2 later. Right? So don't feel like you have to learn all this stuff right away. In fact, I would discourage you from doing so, because you might not fully learn your major scales as thoroughly as you need to if you're distracted thinking you have to learn a whole bunch of other stuff. You don't. Right? Just focus on major, and the rest will come when you're ready, and you'll know when you're ready, I believe. All right, so that's it for this one. Thanks for that question. I'll put the question asker's name in the description. Please keep those questions coming. Email me. Check out the Ask Me Questions video for details about that. Send me more questions. I will try to answer them. And thanks for watching. I will see you next time.